Johnny Dollar.
Hi, Johnny. This is Harvey Wakeman.
Well, Harv.
You know, it's State Unity Life down here in New York.
Sure, I know. How are you, Harv?
Great, Johnny, just great. But listen now, I got me a problem.
Well, you're not alone in that.
Or rather, one of my clients has. Ever hear of a man named Thomas Rayburn Morgan?
No, I don't recall
I
him,
guess you'd have no reason to. He's a broker, Johnny, a stockbroker. Has his own little office over in Newark, NJ.
Well, what seems to be?
Well, I'll tell you what. He called me up on the phone a couple of minutes ago and told me that he needs you, Johnny Dollar, right away, you and nobody else.
Did he tell you what his problem was?
No, he didn't say what's bothering him, not the slightest hint, but he did make it plain there's no time to wait.
Well, unless I have some idea...
So I promised I'd call you right away, so I've called you. So his office address is 13827 North Commerce Street over there in Newark.
Harv.
So grab your hat and get on down to see him, okay?
Now, Harv.
Meantime, I'll give him a call and tell him to stop worrying you're on your way.
Now, listen, will you?
And if you're a good boy, Johnny...
Harvey, will you shut up long enough for me to get in a word edgewise?
What? What's that? Well, sure. Go ahead, Johnny. Don't get sore.
I said...
It's just that he's a very important client, so anything we can do...
I said that unless I have some idea just what this man Morgan wants me for...
Johnny, boy, didn't you hear me? I haven't got the least idea what's troubling Mr. Morgan.
Maybe I better phone him myself.
No. There is no point in calling him. He'll only say to come and see him, and he'll tell you what it's all about himself.
Well, then I'm sorry, Harv, but these blind assignments for the birds. You tell him I'm not interested unless I can find out exactly...
And I'll tell you this, too, Johnny. Considering the size of all the policies we've written for him...
No, Harv.
Considering the way that guy is loaded, considering that when I call him back and tell him you're on the way...
No, now listen...
But that a guy like you comes high, and that you have to be sure of a nice, big, extra fee...
Fee?
And, Johnny, when you see how generous he can be when he wants to... Well, Johnny boy?
You said fee?
I said fee. And doesn't the sound of money, and I mean a lot of it, doesn't it kind of make these silly questions of yours, unnecessary? Well, Johnny?
What's your guess?
Okay. 13827 North Commerce Street, Newark, New Jersey.
Thomas Rayburn Morgan.
Right.
I'm on my way.
The CBS Radio Network brings you Bob Reddick in the exciting adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to the State Unity Life Insurance Company, New York City office. Following is an account of expenses incurred during my investigation of the Lone Wolf matter. Expense account item 1. Well, as long as Mr. Morgan is supposed to be such a generous soul, call it $30 even for the plane to Newark and cab to the brokerage office on North Commerce. Mr. Morgan turned out to be a friendly, distinguished, prosperous-looking man of about 50. But he also looked more than just a little worried.
Sit down, Mr. Dollar. Sit down, please.
Right, Mr. Morgan. Thanks.
No. I'm the one to say thanks. I mean to you for coming here. Strictly speaking, this is not an insurance matter, but to tell you the truth, you're the only one I know of who might be able to help me in this situation.
Now, why is that, sir?
Well, I mean, help me with a proper regard for its confidential aspects. You see, I haven't dared to contact the police about this matter, not even the authorities down there in Philadelphia.
Now, why Philadelphia?
Well, that's where the letter came from.
And what letter is that, Mr. Morgan?
You see, if the facts were to become public knowledge, well, it could mean